Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So let me close this a little.
Yeah, I just booked a time with you for tomorrow so we can talk about masterclass.
Awesome. Thanks. I actually just saw that, and it made me realize that it was 9:30.
Ah,
So,
glad I could help.
is that oh, that's your office. I'm like, is that a background or is that your? No, that's your office. Because you know how I can tell? Because I recognize the spines of most of those books. I'm like, oh, that's not a mock-up.
Yeah, that's actually, George, my office, but I'm at my home office right now. So
Perfect.
But it makes for a good background. I had two clients that I normally meet at my office on a Zoom call yesterday at different times, and they said, "Oh, you're down at your office." I said, "No."
No, I'm up in Evergreen.
That's right.
All right, cool. Good morning, Phil. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Good morning, Phil. Morning, Bob.
Morning, guys.
Scott, I don't recognize you're in red today, not blue. You can't just a Kansas City thing.
Those are fighting words, Phil, for a Bronco fan or a Bear fan, right?
True. Yeah, we've got the orange going here.
Yeah, I was happy to see, Kansas City win. I just like Mahomes and Reed and the attitude of that team. It's a pretty neat organization.
Well, it was good that it was a thrilling Super Bowl, not a washout by halftime.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Or they were showing some highlights of one of the ones just a few years ago with Eli Manning and the Giants, where the game was like 17-12, which is let's have some fun. Let's have a little razzle dazzle.
They did those two touchdowns where the guy was wide open. First on the right side, then on the left side. It's like defense was asleep.
It was a fun game to watch. Even if it hadn't been the Super Bowl, it would have been a really fun game to watch. So
you had to give him credit for that play.
Pardon?
You have to give him credit for how they ran that play.
Yeah,
having that guy come in like he was in motion and then turn back, that was sweet.
It was. I think the NFL has done it appears, and I haven't studied this at all, but it appears they've done a great job with establishing more parity.
Yeah.
We've got where the franchises actually, we have a couple that are perennially struggling, but
hey, don't talk about Chicago that way.
the Bears, the Jets, but even Carolina had a great run there. How about and what's cool?
And Jacksonville, right?
So I'm off the
biggest turnaround in the history of the NFL from a previous record to making the playoffs in 1 year.
Really?
Yeah. Peterson makes all the difference, the quality of coach. So, and a talent like Lawrence.
Yeah, I think his quarterback has something to do with it.
But look what a disaster he was under Urban Meyer.
Don't you find it funny though how these great coaches do so well at one place and then all of a sudden that peters out, but then they go another place and do a fantastic job again?
Yeah, I can tell you that Denver's going to test that theory.
Yeah. It's a testament to the players and probably the general manager, I would say.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Joe.
Hello, Joe. You looked incognito for a second.
He's in the witness protection program.
You're on mute, Joe.
Oh, I'm also a Browns fan, so there's a reason to be incognito in this conversation. We're continue to bet big on unproven assets, and we'll see.
Well, this young crop of quarterbacks right now, sort of, the guys under 30. Wow, it's really fun to watch. And I've got to say, Jalen Hurts, what a game! Rushing for 3 touchdowns, doing the conversion. I mean, he wasn't by any means carrying the team on his back, but it's going to be fun to watch these guys. All these quarterbacks.
Their ability, the Eagles' ability to make that 1 yard on 4th and 1.
Amazing.
How they could just push that line back was phenomenal.
They didn't miss one, did
Jalen Hurts can squat 600. I mean, that guy alone is carrying a couple of players.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, George, this is going to be like that 1983 quarterback class, Elway and Jim Kelly and, considered the best class. This one may push that, over these 2 years. Such great talent.
We're gonna sound like the old men that we are, but the Kelly.
Yeah, wait a minute. Let me chase the kid off my lawn.
Did you say
that was so much
there,
fun?
Scott?
So I moved to the when I moved to the States in '84 was right when that period was starting, and man, yeah, it's a good time to get
just incredible.
Well, who has anything they want to kick around?
Hi, Ed. Hello, Joe.
Morning.
Joseph, good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Hey, Bob, I will send you the note on my mediation connection. Okay. I'm currently in an unable to do any outgoing emails. I was hacked last week, and
oh, no.
Wow.
And so I have to contact Microsoft. I spent yesterday 2 hours. Hopefully today I can get, and I now can receive emails. The problem I have now, next step is send email out.
Sure.
All right. I got 50% one day.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Hey, Ed, enjoyed our time together last week. That was great to spend some time with you.
Yeah, I did too. We don't always get a chance to sit down and exchange quiet minutes like that.
You know what's interesting, guys? I've already had a chance to speak with Phil. I know I have meetings set up with Scott. I'm meeting with you. I'm meeting with I think pretty much everyone who was down in Charleston. And one of the principles that I've added, we just had our 3 principles that we're net givers, that we stay sharp, that we strive to leave an indelible mark with our clients and our peers. And it came up yesterday in every single meeting. And if you saw my calendar, you'd understand. I spent the whole day standing right here doing this. What came out in every single meeting was the power of the intimate setting, right? The power of having these close personal interactions. And it's something that especially Phil has brought up on a couple of occasions. And I want to get it out there and say that is something to which we will continue. I am committed, and we will continue to deliver. Even though we recognize that we're going to have to do some rock concerts, we really want to make sure that our go-to is the intimate dinner. If you think of those 2 different social experiences. Mm-hmm. So that was. It's interesting. So I internalize all of your. There's a reason I set up these calls, guys. It's on the one hand, it's selfish. It's also so that we make sure we keep providing the knowledge expansion in a format that everybody likes. So there's just preliminary feedback from the certification.
Hey, George.
Go ahead, Bob. Scott.
Yeah, George, I thought I'd toss out maybe for a topic of discussion experience I had over the last couple of weeks. I had shared with you, George, that client that was facing losing 50% of their business in one fell swoop because of a major change in their partner who was going to take his services internally. And what I wanted to toss out is something I use, but as coaches, we can draw from so many different resources to be able to reach our clients. So my client was panicking, as you would imagine. There was 10 minutes left in my half-day session with this client when he got the call. And it made me go back to think about a great book and a great movie called And the Bad Played On. And it was about the CDC when they were first dealing with the HIV virus and had no idea what they were dealing with. But something early on both in the book and the movie that was really impactful to me was the director of that team that was working on that initiative said these 3 things. This is what he challenged the team with all the time. What do we think? What do we know? What can we prove? And when I did the follow-up call the next day with my client to talk about, okay, we're going to do a game plan as soon as I get back from Charleston. Let's start out with a list of what do we think, what do we know, what can we prove before you talk to your team so that your team doesn't get panicked. This is an engineering firm with about 17 employees, husband, wife team owns it. And anyway, we only had one thing in the prove, which was they had a director. This is a national, this company that they serve here locally is national in scope. And the only thing they can prove is that the owner of this company was a private equity guy who was doing a roll-up in the industry. The rest of it was, what we think and what we know. And the beauty was that he ended up having a meeting on Monday of last week that ended up sitting down with the head of this initiative, who told them, you're not going to have a risk on any business loss for at least over a year, because what we're doing is we're bringing our own engineering services where we have multiple engineering companies servicing us in our markets across the country. And you're actually the model that we would want to have in these other markets, rather than have 6, 7 vendors. And the beauty is we've got a long runway now. And just being able to take that temperature down by using that think, know, and prove worked out really well. It kept his team comfortable and no panic in the organization. And then we're meeting again on Thursday this week to really finalize the game plan. We got some great start last Thursday, and then going to do it again this week. So I just toss it out as the resource is amazing that we, all of us probably have those things we can pull from a lot of different places to reach our clients in a way that best serves them when they need us.
That's a terrific.
Scott, one of the things that we talked about was telling them that we had the ideal picture when you have multiple players in a market. And I take it that must have been one of the items you were able to articulate and present very clearly to the roll-up people, because each market has unique engineering challenges and stipulations, regulatory, et cetera, that you don't always have access to on a national basis, because they have to be localized and customized.
Yeah, and that insight on your part was terrific, and I appreciate that. Because Denver, because of the soil out here, is one of the most challenging markets for this. This does foundation repairs, by the way. This particular service that they're providing is on foundation repair, and those markets that have very loose soil and shifting soil are really challenging. And then the demands from the cities and building codes and so forth come into play. So that was exactly it. The expertise that they bring here in the state of Colorado in 3 major markets solidified their strength. And in fact, this head of engineering told them, we wouldn't even try to tackle these. We've got a couple of people going to be in your market doing very simple things, and we're not going to make you train us. That'll be on us to fix it. So, the beauty is that we've got a full year of that runway. And Ed, I talked briefly with the owners about even, that opportunity to acquisition with a baby boomer dominated industry, right, in engineering. And there may be some great opportunity for growth through acquisition for additional services. So
that's cool.
Awesome.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's great news, Scott. And
we all get so personally invested in our clients, right? George, it almost made me think about December when you got the news on core value. It's like the rug is just pulled out from you in one fell swoop. Now, I've only been working with the client for a year, and I told them right from the beginning, customer concentration is an issue. And we'll have to get after we had other things to do first. But I unfortunately, I was a prophet.
Well, the great news for you, George, is you had a backup plan in the works, right?
Yeah.
Which every company needs to have. I mean, everybody should have that contingency plan. And you had one, so that going to make a big difference.
yeah, and I didn't know it was a contingency plan. I thought it was a parallel, but well, it's a blessing, right? If I hadn't set out and guys, it comes back from you, right? I've got the incredible good fortune to live at the middle of this web of which you guys are all strands, and to have said, but for that, we wouldn't have had Bob. The fact that I got the bloody book done in November it's just serendipity. It's just lucky, really, really lucky, fortunate, good timing, whatever. And the guys are working on the final. So those of you who are not in Charleston, we did an unveil of Clarity Level 1. It is up, it is working.
Yeah.
I came home, I spent the weekend, from a guy who worked on Christmas, it won't surprise you. It's not work, right? It's fun. I'm playing. But there was a couple, there was one scoring that they hadn't gotten quite right. You guys saw that the list of growth killers was this long, and we can't sit in front of the client and be like, all of them. So they had actually missed, they had the scoring exactly backwards. That's okay. That's why there's testing. And I'm making some of the graphics pop. One of the things, and this is for your benefit, Steve and Joseph and Joe, one of the graphics that, how do we explain to a client? This builds on your point, Bob, that we're just lucky, because Clarity is a completely different animal than core value was. Completely different. Here we're talking about strategic capacity, and strategic capacity in 2 axes. And I'd be happy to share my screen. And talking to a client about a relatively arcane term, which is strategic capacity. What it goes down to is when we write $3 million on our VTO, Joe, that $3 million, what capacity does the enterprise have to deliver that $3 million? What strengths can we leverage, and what weaknesses? Where do we not measure up? It's not weakness, right? But where do we need to do some work to raise ourselves up to best practices? And that's what we're going to communicate. If anybody's interested in me doing a screen share, I'm happy to. Joseph is all right, man.
Yes, please.
New York needs a screen share.
Let's see here. Okay. Well, this is actually. Can you see my screen, guys?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to start here, and this is. Let's make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So this is a business with EBITDA, this is for the engineers, right? Even our gross revenue is appropriate. This one has $3.5 million as our multiplicand. And then we have our range of multiples. And, the low end of the range of multiples, we're at a little under 3x. And at the high end, we're about 6x. And by the way, the tool, guys, allows you to, if you leave it blank, and it says it in red, if you leave it blank, it'll use default values for high multiple, low multiple, and margin. If you fill it in, but you can overtype. You can be like, you know what? I want to put in my own multiples. Great. We don't have a dog in the fight. This is, if you leave it blank, it's going to calculate based on industry norms. So this business is worth 11.7 at the low end, 23,500,000 at the high end. But the conversation we want to lead is, listen, if we look at, we will have already talked through a graphic like this that says, okay, well, here are your 3 dimensions of business growth. Top performing businesses are closer to 100. Underperforming businesses are not. And you're here. The few that with the group of businesses that I've used to test this fall right in this range right here, and it won't surprise us, right? They've got some things they're getting right, and some things that they're not yet. So I'm gonna go back here. So what we want to lead as a conversation, and I'm obviously in Excel. We want to lead a conversation about growth capacity and value capacity, and simply put, growth capacity is the strength of the business largely in dimensions 1 and dimension 2, right? Predictable cash flow, predictable profitable cash flow, and predictable sustainable growth. How do we do in that area? And then without getting into a course on what but this is having effective senior leadership, a sales process, a marketing process, recurring revenues, et cetera. And then value capacity comes down to, do you have dominant market share? Do you have a strong brand? Is your legal house in order? Do you have audited financials, right? The things that are going to, when we go to the deal table, we're going to say, okay, not only do I have all of these attributes, but I also present a low risk profile. Mm-hmm. And it stands to reason, right? So a business that has low growth capacity and low value capacity is a fire sale. A business that is high on both should trade at the upper end of the range of multiples. And our goal is to have a conversation with the business owner to say, okay, well, your hang on a sec. Let's see. There we go. Here we are inside the tool. So your growth capacity, this one is actually 59. That's a scoring that they're fixing. But these guys have a growth capacity of 59 and a value capacity of 54. Well, we look at that in the context of this grid. We're sort of in this range. So we're not at the bottom end of the range of multiples, but we're also not, it's $9 million, $9.5 million. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money. And that's exactly what the market will do to you. So again, we're using value as our measuring stick for the health of the business, and it's the appropriate measuring stick. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. So Joseph nodding his head up and down. Does this make sense to you guys? Got great reviews in Charleston, and it's in the software. But as you can tell, it's a net new way of looking at the world.
George,
Bob,
do you think it would be worthwhile for you to re-demo the Clarity software maybe at the Growth Drive study group next week?
Yeah, and hopefully before that, get out there. The guys so I sent them a punch list, and they're going through the punch list, and we're in tweaks, right? We're in tweaks phase. It's up and running. And Bob, we can do that. But I'm going to do it more. I'm going to do it more broadly. So we have the survey. This can be embedded in your website, right? You can embed it as a landing page. You can also embed it as the questions, right? We have our client intake form. Where should we send your results? And this would be the marketing experience would end here. When we send them an email, or they get a summary report, they essentially get this essentially. Okay, and then we have business information. What do we know about the business? And then the report. And the report goes through growth capacity, value capacity, goals, business fundamentals. These are being changed to look like this. Okay, they weren't impactful enough. So like that. Yeah, thanks. Any questions about
how many? I mean,
if you think about this, go ahead. Sorry.
How many pages is this report, George?
If you were to print it out, it would be approximately 2 pages.
Okay.
So nice. And you can export it as a PDF. And they are currently working on, or I saw that it works. Export it as a doc, and importantly, export the data as a CSV. So you can take a client and export their data as a CSV. So if you think about all the power that gives you by getting it out of the system, so if we can export it as a CSV, for example, if you exported all of your clients, you could upload them into HubSpot. and you just create fields in HubSpot, which is very easy to do. And now suddenly you have a marketing engine. Inside your marketing engine, you have, it's not a marketing engine. Inside something like HubSpot, you have a single source of truth on your client that includes this information. So you're not jumping back and forth between systems. And the API is being written to HubSpot for this. And then you can use Zapier if you want to put it into whatever.
Hey, George, does this answer the question that Core Value used to, what is your goal?
Oh my gosh. Yes, it does better than that. So what we're going to do, if we look at the intake form, so these are being homogenized, right? So what are your top goals? You can check all that apply. Oh, I want to stabilize cash flow. I would like to grow revenues. Oh, I prepare this thing for sale and make it easier to run. I want all of that. Well, that's great, because we want that in our conversation, right? We want to know that all the things that are on their mind. But then what's the number one? You have to pick one, and that's a required to move forward. And then this is sign me up, not for the Growth Drive newsletter, for occasional updates, which will give you permission to put them on your marketing list. If you're using this on your website, you can put them on your marketing list anyhow. I leave that up to you. But and then what is your biggest business challenge right now? This is not required, but this is we can't get past 5 million. Boom. And if I click submit, leave blank, on my report, it should have updated. Say, there you go. By the way, completely updatable. So if someone does it online and you go back and you want to go, you have a conversation with them and dig down a little, we can change these answers and in your dashboard track performance over time. Okay. So, and music to a lot of your ears, we're already doing the pivot. We're like mid pivot to the equity planning module, for which we have all of the scoring rules, et cetera. Greg has been fantastic. Talk about a net giver. Greg has been fantastic. And then there's another concept I'm excited about, but I won't introduce yet, because let's get this done. Okay. Please.
So, George, I had a couple questions.
Sure.
Meeting with a mechanical contractor yesterday and talking about growth potential in a very tight labor market. We're seeing across the country, but each market's a little different. In this particular market, Columbus, we've got a lot of growth from out of town factories, major factories coming in. One being Intel, Honda's putting a new plant in. It's squeezing very specific market segments. So all that has to, and I'll talk through it with Ed, but curious about when you look at the growth capacity, right, and what's necessary. Sometimes you just have market restrictions in a service model, which we really like the repetitive nature of the cash flow, and yet it's so labor intensive that to grow it is going to be expensive. Possible, perhaps, maybe that's where you look for acquisition targets, right, to grow, instead of just organically. But obviously you're going to have to make those nuances as the evaluation expert. But talk a little bit about how maybe that comes into play when it comes to labor-driven growth, or growth that's very dependent on labor.
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. Without knowing much about the case, my knee-jerk reaction while you were talking, and this is something that we train and spend a lot of time talking about not doing, right? So my knee-jerk was maybe they should just be acquired, but I don't know enough about. So we would ask 1,000 questions. That's what the growth conversation is about, right? We're going to ask 1,000. We're going to dig down onto, what does our client, what does the decision maker, the check writer, the person for whom this is the most important thing that's happening right now, let's really tease it out. Let's not start answering questions. Like in my brain, I'm like, oh, wow, maybe they just want to sell now. Okay, so let me go back here. So Joe, to answer your question more directly, when we think in terms of the three dimensions, you have a tight labor market. We have to do two things, and I'll keep referring back to Charleston. We talked about this, Phil, right? We talked about this at length. Excuse me. Productive and loyal employees who are engaged, right? And engaged didn't quite do it, so that's why I used the description productive and loyal, because acquiring employees is difficult. And acquiring the right employees, attracting the right employees is difficult. And then turnover is a killer. And Jeff Ketchum was in the room. He is an HR and senior leadership recruiting specialist. That's what he does. And we ended up having a very rich conversation on this, which brings me back to these intimate settings. Anyway, so Joe, we want to have productive and loyal employees. We're going to want to the extent that we can, nail our employees' feet to the floor. There are ways to do it for senior leadership. There are ways to do it for, we won't get into the house, but we want to make sure our current employees are productive and loyal, right? And then we want to have a strong culture that's part of keeping people, a strategic culture, and part of their what's strategically important, it sounds like, not knowing anymore, to this client is, it's a strategic imperative for them to retain their people. And how do we, it's funny, I was just rereading that chapter in the book. I got it back from editing. Strong and loyal customer. And now this is easy hire and train new employees, but the best practice is to find the right people who become the productive quickly. So Joe, to your point, this is, if you're thinking about having this conversation with that specific client, we are within, we're at question 11 here. We will have zeroed right in on their pain points. Does the market support significant growth of the business? Let's talk about that. We've always said that the level one survey, this level one survey would take, you can fill it out in five minutes, 8 minutes. However, if we're going to have that conversation, if we think about the growth conversation, and we've done the forward, and we've established the spot on the horizon for them. It needs to be $3 million, because that $3 million is going to drive a value of 18 million when I pay off debt, and my original investors and my brother-in-law, then I net 10, and the bankers, then I net 10, and that 10 is going to spit out, right? That conversation is critical. Now we're talking about the second part of the growth conversation, which is, all right, well, does the business have the ability to reach that dot? Does it have the capacity to reach that dot on the horizon? And this is a place where you, as the advisor, can help them generate data. So these are just a few points I'm hitting on, but Joe, does that go to answering your question?
Yeah, it's addressed in the platform. That was something that just to a lot of these guys trying to talk to them about growth, they're having trouble just retaining what they have, right? So that's why we're installing the business operating system and getting all the things that come along with it. So there's a book out there by Daniel Sullivan, Who, Not How, and it really goes to the whole art of collaborating and growing, but not necessarily having to do everything yourself, right? So instead of, most entrepreneurs go to the how am I going to do this? How are we going to do that? Versus the who could do this for us. And it's something good practice to bring in with your coaching, with your self-limiting belief clients, that when you start asking them series of self-limiting beliefs, a lot of it is centered around their own limitations and the way they think of things. That's sort of a way to kind of broaden their horizon. And Audible has it, but Dan Sullivan did a really nice job with that book.
He really did, and I would posit that perhaps Simon Sinek would start with why. That's what the growth conversation is. What is our client's ultimate why? So, for example, would your client, there are a bunch of options open to your client, right? They can close their doors, they can be acquired, they can acquire someone else, they can expand their product and service set to mitigate this risk. I mean, there are a bunch of things they can do, and
yeah, they're a $15 million contractor. They're throwing out $5 million a year in net EBIT, and so I mean they're doing very well.
Yep.
And so now it's a matter of what kind of growth can they put on? What's the expectation of where can they grow? So yeah, it's a big.
And do they want to grow? Right. I mean, not all business owners want to grow.
Yeah, so and don't think I'm breaking any confidence, but he's like, he's working on his children's children, right? Taking care of them. So he's got his children taken care of. He's got himself and his wife, and now he's working on grandkids as far as setting them up to So I think he's just losing a lot of drive, just saying, I don't need any more money, right? And this is such a pain in the ass. So that's kind of one of those things, getting back to the why, right? So, but getting those intimate conversations is critical. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, any thoughts?
George, if I heard correctly down in Charleston, both the questions and the answers to it are rated or have a weighting to them. So the top answer is a 4, then a 2, 1, 0.
Yeah, it goes between 4 and 0, and then they're weighted.
Yeah, and then you have an algorithm that kind of weights categories too. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is the people category, to Joey's point, is the people category kind of weighted pretty high because every business has that challenge?
Sure. And what we do that's different than a lot of we split principally people and finance. People and finance are present in all 3 of the dimensions, right? And that's what's liberating about thinking in terms of dimensions that are interoperative rather than striations, right? And I've got a stack of, so we want to think about people. That's why we start with dimension 1, Bob, with let's imagine that Joe is sitting down with his client, or Scott is sitting down with the client. It's a similar opportunity, and we just say, okay, let's really drill down. We've done an initial analysis on the 3 dimensions, and we're getting a sense of your growth capacity and your value capacity. And a lot of business owners will come to care about, right? They're not going to start, but they're going to come to care about their value capacity. But at first, let's meet them where they are.
Yeah,
they want to grow. They want to grow the business. Okay, or they want to make the business easier to run. That's grow and easier to run are 84% of the market. That's 50,000 over 50,000 CEOs telling us 84% of the time they either want to grow it or they want operational freedom. Cool. Let's meet them where they are. Let's talk about, that's why we talk in segments. Like, so people, Bob, productive and loyal. Now, because it's in the first dimension, it has a different weight than hiring and making productive, which is in the second dimension. We start talking about growth. So, and then in the third dimension, we're talking about active ways of loyalty, phantom stock for senior or real equity for senior leaders, profit sharing. What is looking back now, looking out at the world and saying, what are the best practices? And in many instances is what would private equity do if they stepped in here today? What would they do with this business? And what would they want to see in order to be interested in this business? And then what would they do if they stepped in? And so I hope that answered your question.
Yep. Thanks.
It's not only a private equity perspective, but it's hard to argue with a bunch of women and men who have a proven track record of failing, but also of identifying businesses and doing a great job of understanding what business can we grow, where can we have high confidence that we're going to have a return. And that is the entire premise around, but we want our clients to be doing a self-directed private equity play. At the end of the day, that's what this is, that, you know, the name of the game. I want to take this latent value of my business and push it over into my ledger. And then I want to create net new and make sure that that goes to my ledger. And do it in a way that gives someone confidence that we're going to grow past this point, that the best is yet to come, and that this business is immortal and is going to go on to greater goodness. Am I up on my soapbox now or what? Sorry,
You're on a roll. Looks like you have a question.
Amen.
Go ahead, Steve. What do you got?
So perhaps I don't know this because I wasn't at Charleston, but
yeah, we missed you, man.
Everything you've said is predicated on the 3 dimensions of growth. So is that education provided as a consequence of this analysis, or is that incumbent upon each of us to educate our clients so that the context is set?
B. So when we come into the conversation, Steve, I should use my moderation techniques. Hey guys, what do you think? I won't do that to you. So go ahead, Bob.
I think Steve brings up a good point, and I don't know if it's in the report or not, George, but I personally wouldn't mind seeing the 3-dimension pyramid and then kind of the divisions of stuff in the report. I think that would be pretty cool. It would give us, my opinion, it would give us right in the report the ability to talk about that stuff.
I think you're absolutely right, Bob, and that is going to be something that we put in. That's just simply a graphic that we'll put in. You know, give me a month. But I think you're absolutely right. So what we really want to say is, when our client says, "Okay, I want to grow," okay, cool. Then let's make sure that you don't stress your cash flow to the breaking point. Let's not kill the business by growing the business. And the first thing we need to do is that's the first dimension, right? Let's make sure we have your cash, and this is nothing magic, you know, it's in all of these books, right? You know, let's get your cash. A library here. There's one behind Scott. You know, get your cash and your people and your processes in line. Yep. And the first dimension focuses hard on people, cash, and processes for stabilizing, creating predictability in cash flow, positive cash flow. Somebody reminded me that, you know, there is negative cash flow, and we've all lived that. So, but positive cash flow. And then if they want to grow, say, okay, now, then what we'll do is we'll start making investments in growth, but you will be able to, now we're using a forward-looking budget, and we're tracking our actuals because we will have instituted a scoreboard, something like a flash report in the first dimension. It's fascinating. So in the first dimension, we're trying to get the CEO to let go a little, to delegate with accountability. And we use our flash report as one of the tools, one of the things that we can institute in a business to create accountability, because the CEO isn't accountable to every line on the flash report. The senior leadership team is, and that necessarily, if we do it right, if this team is engaged and aligned, then we necessarily create collaboration, because, you know, sales has to work with ops, has to work with, et cetera, with finance. And then we're saying, all right, well, now let's place some bets. Now that we're confident in our cash flow, that we're going to have $100,000 every month, then we have our current, you know, we have our current obligations, and we have net new for which we've budgeted and against which we're tracking. And we have instituted a cash reporting system that we're looking at on a weekly basis, so that now we'll grow your business without a case of mail-ox tucked under the desk. Which, guys, put up your hands. Who's been in a business that's growing like that? It is not ideal. It's chaotic. That's why Vern Harnish very wisely defines robust growth as 20% a year. I think that's a great mark. We talked about this. We talked about it in each certification class. But, you know, if we can all agree that 20% a year is robust growth.
You're describing my client, one of my clients, to the T right now. 100% growth last year in sales, but only grew operations by 20%. So their backlog went up 5x, and we're working really hard to get them on all the principles of Dimension 1.
That's awesome, Bob. Is that the client who said, "I don't care, I'm doing it again this year"? Is that your client?
That client I no longer have. I let that one go.
Yeah, if you're gonna throw yourself off the cliff, I'm not coming with you. Yeah.
This one may be the same thing, because the CEO is the sales guy too, and he talks about growing at 15% KGR, and then he turns around and does 100% sales increase, and they ultimately end up with a backlog that's almost a year's worth of backlog for what they can, their capacity. So we're trying to catch the capacity up. We doubled their workforce in November and December of last year. But they still have a long ways to go, and the guy still wants to increase sales again, and we're trying to get him. I'm not one to lift the gas pedal on sales, but this one definitely has to lift the gas pedal on sales.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. When we have to say to our client, have you considered taking your foot off the loud pedal? And anyone who has experience doing that, I know Bob just had to do it. Phil, Joseph.
Yeah, I actually, when I sit with my clients, most of you guys are a lot smarter and more experienced than I am. So I have this methodology where I try and keep things as simple as possible. And over the last couple of years, I've come to the understanding the simplest way to explain what it is that we do and what the client should focus on is the value equation, right? The value of something is based on its qualitative measurement and its quantitative measurement. So that's the quality of the company, the foundation of the company, and how much cash it produces. And the solutions to all of their problems are on how to expand, the combination of two. In other words, the value. It's really very simple. To Joe's question before about finding quality people. Well, people will gravitate to successful companies. So if the human capital investment is there, people will gravitate to it. Well, how do you get that that portion increase? Well, you've got to work on the cash flows. If you've got more cash to work with, I hate to say it, the more money you have available to solve a problem, the better quality people you'll have who can produce a solution to the problem. And if you have more money, you can pay them, pay other people more, and they're going to come to you because they also want to be part of something successful. So the focus always has to be, from them is balancing this equation, which is make the company better, from a quality perspective, and at the same time, try and find ways to generate more net cash so you can help fix that problem. Yeah. And they have to work in balance. I think it's a mistake for people to spend time focusing on growth. The growth will happen almost automatically as you fix the foundational elements and you provide more cash to be able to do the job that needs to be done. So when people talk about, I want to grow the company, I say to them, look, focus on the fundamentals. The rest will happen automatically.
Amen. I thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, just a point on lifting the gas pedal, because people can take that the wrong way. So the first thing I'm asking them to do is actually start giving their customers the proper lead time. It's one thing to just to try and basically quit selling. I'm not telling them to quit selling. I'm telling them to at least start giving them a realistic lead time. So their lead times are typically 14 to 16 weeks, and operational, their lead times are more like 40 weeks. And this guy is still telling his clients it's 14 to 16 weeks. He's driving the thing right into an iceberg. Yeah. And thus why I've asked Ed for his contact information, because this guy is pretty thick-skulled and he needs somebody to help him think differently. There's a big backstory to this I won't go into, but
Bob, you could just force him to to see what his cash flow gap is based on what he's doing, because it's possible that he's actually going to drive himself into bankruptcy. I mean, it's not uncommon that people force growth so fast they run out of cash, then they can't pay their basic obligations, and then basically SOL.
Yeah,
so that might be a simple way of producing, or maybe the sustainable growth rate calculation, and saying, look, you can't grow your company faster than this, otherwise you're going to go into bankruptcy.
Yeah, I've already had that conversation, Joe, and it's just like I didn't even talk to him. When I'm talking to him, he acknowledges it, admits it, and he turns around and does it anyhow. It's a phenomenal case study, and I'll say when I turn it around, it'll be a fantastic case study. But I better say if I turn it around too.
Well, that could be a case study of what not to do.
Yeah. It's funny. I was having a debrief with one of your colleagues yesterday with a very, very similar issue. And what he's decided to do is pull back a level and say, okay, well, here's what I'm willing to do. I'm not willing to be. So if we think of our 1 to 5 mile, 1 or a 5, the Francis Brown scale.
Yeah.
This advisor came into the engagement and was hired as a 3, and because of the destructive behavior of the CEO, doesn't want to abandon the client. Fair, right? Feels a sense of responsibility, but it said, I'm gonna be up at a 2.5, with 1 being a lead generator, right, and 2 being the architect. He's going to be the architect, but parachuted in every, periodically to see how they're doing. It's like if anyone's built a house, it's exactly like the architect on a building project, right? They give the blueprints, they hand it over to someone to build, and then they come back periodically and say, hey, here's the blueprint. Are we, is this the building what we thought it would be? And it's fascinating.
I'm going to do the same thing, George.
Yeah.
Thanks to
what you're hitting on, Bob, is customer sat, right? This is going to, I don't know where they are on recurring revenues, but this is the first dimension right here. His customer sat numbers are going to go into the tank because sales is making promises, ops isn't delivering, and what's that going to look like? And are your customers still going to be evangelists for you, or are they going to be out doing the opposite, which is saying, yeah, good quality, but you better be prepared to wait, and that can put pressure on margins. Bob, it's funny to watch this. I hope he makes good decisions.
Yeah, the thing that I would throw out is that what he needs is a board of advisors that are involved with day-to-day deliveries, like a car repair shop or something, saying that you can't tell them the car will be ready tomorrow when you know you won't have the part until tomorrow or 2 days before. You don't know when the part's coming. And so you can't make a promise, but there's somebody like that can explain in very simple, everyday terms that you can't be telling customers 14 weeks when you know it's going to be 40. You've got to start getting back to realism. And the other thing is talk about people. I've got a carp group that I've just finished some work with down in Cincinnati, and he's doing so much to get his employees to be the #1 attractor of more employees, because he's kicked them into a, shall I say, a significant economic incentive to bring in equally well-trained mechanics. He don't need more starters. What he needs is trained. So he's giving his person $2,500 to bring him in, and if the person stays for the 6 months, and then he kicks that person another $2,500 and another $5 back to the person who brought him in. So he's giving them 2 kicks just to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mentoring, and that goes to culture, that goes to collaboration on the shop floor. That is fabulous, Ed.
Exactly.
Hey guys, I'm going to have to cut this off in about 2 minutes, because my 10:30 is going to be in this space. You know what we should start? What I intend to start doing is to move this conversation from Zoom into circle. And maybe we'll do that not next week. I think next week I'm unfortunately down in Boston. So, but so that we don't have to, you guys can keep the conversation going, even if I have to jump off. A great discussion, guys. Thank you. Anyone have any key takeaways or things they want to add before we sign off? I'm going to post this, by the way, to YouTube. So I hope that's okay. If it's not, let me know.
Have a good week, all.
Just looking forward to the demo.
Yeah, Joseph, you'll be the first. I will tell you, I'll make this commitment to you. You will be the first to know. So there's been, from the community, I've gotten such tremendous feedback, input, suggestions, and I appreciate it. This is your tool, right? It has to work for you, and your feedback is incredibly valuable as we, as we take it to market, and it's going to. I know that it'll iterate. It is going to evolve a little. We're going to add things like, Bob, the pyramid to guide the conversation. Maybe move the scores over to the pyramid. That's all. That's just a graphics thing.
Yeah.
So very
Thank
cool.
you, George.
Well,
Great seeing everyone.
Okay, great.
Thank you all.
Everybody have a great week.
Have a great week. Anything I can do to help, let me know.
Thanks, George.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, guys. Be well. Bye.